Imagine a world where moral certainty dissolves into shadow, a campus where a whisper can ruin a career, a professor whose influence eclipses her empathy. Welcome to After the Hunt, the film that has critics debating not just its plot, but what it says about power, academia, and the so-called unhinged professor trope. Today, we venture beyond plot summaries. We'll dig into what this film and the recent New York Times piece titled The Age of Unhinged-Professor Art reveals about the intersections of prestige, gender, cancel culture, and representation. Buckle up. This is not your average movie review. To start, let's get our bearings. After the Hunt is directed by Luca Guadagnino and stars Julia Roberts as Alma Imhoff, a tenured philosophy professor at Yale. The inciting incident, a graduate student, Maggie, played by Ayo Edebiri, accuses Alma's close colleague, Hank, played by Andrew Garfield, of sexual misconduct. Alma is drawn into the center of a storm she can't fully control or decode. Critics have responded in divided tones. Some praise its visual elegance and the way it toys with ambiguity. Others lament that it's too abstract, too indirect, and too cold to deliver real moral clarity. But the New York Times essay, After the Hunt and the Age of Unhinged-Professor Art, goes deeper. It argues that this film is more than entertainment. It's a symptom of broader cultural anxieties about universities, authority, and spectacle. Let's unpack that. The article coins a phrase, unhinged professor art. That is, cultural works that lean into caricatures of professors as emotionally volatile, morally compromised, or dangerously unstable. These portrayals feed into anxieties that those in the ivory tower are disconnected from real life, that intellectualism can mask cruelty, and that the prestige of the academy shields destructive impulses from accountability. Why is this proliferating now? The Times piece suggests it's entwined with broader pressures, the marketization of universities, the intensification of social media scrutiny, and a cultural moment obsessed with scandal. Universities, once cloistered, now operate in full public view, and that exposure invites myth-making. Moreover, these stories appeal to a certain cinematic logic: disorder, reputation on the line, hidden histories, ambiguous guilt. It's tempting territory for storytellers seeking psychological tension. But therein lies danger. These tropes can erase the mundane realities of academic life, simplify the trauma of assault, or naturalize institutional failure. To quote the essay, these unhinged portraits aren't just dramatic license. They reflect how we want to see, or fear to see, academics as decadent, secretive, or morally suspect. It's a kind of spectacle of judgment. A striking formal choice in After the Hunt is what it does not show. We never see a full flashback of what really happened in Maggie's apartment. The story is filtered through testimony, memory, hesitation. Alma probes for clarity, but we and she are left uncertain. In this sense, the film is less a courtroom drama than a meditation on uncertainty. Who to believe? How much do we demand certainty when memory fractures? How does prestige distort justice? Some critics say this ambiguity is a failure. Viewers want clarity, verdicts, closure. Others argue it's the point. The film doesn't offer answers because real life rarely does. It mirrors the way power can obfuscate and perception can be weaponized. In the New York Times essay, the author argues that the film's ambiguity is itself a reflection of how universities operate in crisis, covering, delaying, deflecting. Alma's hesitancy, her shifting alliances, her own questions of positioning, these are precisely the dynamics institutions cultivate when scandal rips through their ranks.
One of the trickiest, most charged dynamics in the film is Alma's dual role. She is a woman in power, but also deeply enmeshed in protecting that power. The narrative forces us to ask, is she a feminist hero, an opportunist, a hypocrite? One review in the Washington Post frames it this way: The film tries to explore misconduct in academia, but does so with problematic simplifications, reducing it to intellectual puzzles rather than emotional stakes. As a woman with tenure, Alma holds rare security. That security becomes a lens. She has something to lose. The film stages tension between her obligations to her protégés, her own ambition, and her loyalty to colleagues. She becomes a gatekeeper. The Times essay interrogates how Hollywood draws women professors into narratives where moral concession seems inevitable. The protective woman scholar can be asked to resolve or absorb conflicts, especially when the stakes include male prestige or institutional survival. In this film, Alma is both judged and judged to judge. She's placed in paradoxes we rarely enforce on male protagonists. This brings us to the third level, how After the Hunt reveals the university as a microcosm of public spectacle. When scandals break, academic proceedings often become media stories, press releases, resignations, narrative frames. The Times essay suggests that After the Hunt dramatizes the university as it is perceived in the public imagination, a site of vulnerable reputation, symbolic capital, and theatrical power. In this fantasy, every whisper matters, and no secret stays secret. Also embedded is the tension between public judgment and institutional protocols. Alma faces whispers in her department, but also the slow gears of tenure and review. Her decisions may not be ethically pure, but they operate within a system that rewards caution, image management, and control. In a broader sense, the film and the linked essay probe, is the academic institution resilient or fragile? Do scandals correct institutions or shatter their legitimacy? Are public calls for accountability amplified by cultural narratives that love a damaged institution as much as they despise it? Again, the article warns that such portrayals risk flattening real questions of justice into dramatic spectacle, where institutional reform and survivors' needs disappear into moral theater. This is not to say After the Hunt has no merits. Many reviews praise its visual plausibility, tone, and the way it unsettles certainty. The New Yorker calls it a stylized, provocative drama, a web of suspicion, performative intellect, and moral ambiguity. But critics also push back. The Washington Post argues it is sometimes muddled and overly reliant on philosophical illusion rather than narrative emotional truth. There's also risk that such a film, framed by the unhinged professor trope, normalizes institutional veneer over accountability, that audiences walk away fascinated by the performance but uninterested in structural reforms. The Times essay offers a caution. We must see beyond myth to actual power, procedure, and real consequences.
A further counterpoint, not all academic scandals or misconducts involve erudite intrigue or theatrical reply. Many are harrowing, messy, lived, and ongoing. And the more we dramatize them into neat puzzles, the more we distance them from real survivors. After the Hunt and the Age of Unhinged-Professor Art invite us to look closely not at scandal, but at narrative, at power, and at how culture shapes academic authority. They warn us, stories can be seductive, but also misleading. So, as we close, what do we lose when ambiguity becomes the aesthetic and clarity the problem? How much does prestige shield behavior from scrutiny? Do we trust institutions, or do we demand their constant performance? And finally, are we consuming academic scandal as entertainment? And what does that do to our willingness to demand accountability? I leave you with that. Thanks for watching. If you like this dive, hit subscribe, leave a comment below. Which aspect intrigued you most, or which portrayal felt off? Until next time, keep questioning the stories behind the stories.